Hello and welcome to the Fit to Transform podcast, where you learn how to train and diet effectively and, most importantly, how to maintain those results for life, once and for all. I'm Nikias Tomasiello, a transgender training and nutrition coach working online with anyone who's ready for a true lifestyle transformation, anywhere they may be in the world. As a friendly reminder, any and all information provided is for educational purposes only. You should consult with your doctor before implementing any changes to your diet and exercise program. With that disclaimer out of the way, thank you for being here. Now grab yourself a cup of tea or pre-workouts and enjoy. Yo, welcome back to the podcast and thank you for tuning into this Q&A episode. I haven't done a Q&A in a while on the podcast, but I am in the habit of doing 2 Q&A sessions every week on my Instagram stories where I would put up a question box and then I answer people's questions. So I collect the questions even after answering them on my stories because obviously if I answer them on a story, they'll be gone in 24 hours. I save them and then I pick the most applicable to the podcast or to the newsletter and I answer them in one of those formats. And by applicable, I mean questions that are a little bit more generic that can apply to a larger audience like you, dear listeners. So for this episode, I collected a few questions on 3 topics: cutting, bulking, and maintenance calories. And I tried to alternate a question around cutting with one around bulking and with one around maintenance to keep it interesting. So without further ado, let's get into the first question. And actually, before I get there, I just wanted to thank everyone who takes part in the bi-weekly Q&A. Not bi-weekly, I do it twice per week. How do you say that? It's not fortnightly because that's once every 2 weeks, but bi-weekly also seems to imply once every 2 weeks. It's a bit confusing, isn't it, how English can work out like that? Anyway, I want to thank everyone who submits questions because I love answering them and I think they really help other people as well, especially the shyer people who do not want to come forward with a question themselves, and I'm always very happy to receive them. So if you're listening right now and you're not taking advantage of those Q&A boxes, please do so. I would really love to get a question from you. So let's get into question number 1. Any tips to help impatience in a cut? And oh boy, do I have tips. In no particular order. Number 1, set a checkpoint so that you have some sort of end in mind. For example, you could say to yourself, okay, in week number 8 of this cut, I'm going to review the progress I have made and how much diet fatigue I've accumulated. And then I'm going to decide whether I need to take a break from the deficit or whether I'm even so happy with the results I've gotten so far that I don't need to keep cutting. So it may not be exactly the end date of the diet, but at least it's a temporary end or a date that you're working towards, as opposed to simply telling yourself, I'm going to cut until I'm happy. The second suggestion is to focus on your actions, which you can control, instead of focusing over physique changes, which are not under your control. For example, could you improve your nutrition in any particular way? Could you improve training? I believe it's important to focus on these behaviors, not only because you have them under your control, but also because you have to do them regularly. So you have to do your steps every day, you have to eat every day, you have to do your training a few times per week. And I think that helps mentally focus on the present instead of constantly worrying about the end of the cut, which may be in weeks, months, or for some people who live in larger bodies, even years. My third suggestion is to not make fat loss into a big deal, because I presume that you have a life outside of fitness. So go and live it. Because if you're getting so impatient in a cut, chances are you're making it a huge part of your life. But if you stay busy, the time will go by faster. And also, it will go by in a more enjoyable and productive way, as opposed to looking at the clock, waiting for the diet to be over. Question number two. Do you get diminishing returns in muscle gain with each new bulk? And is there anything special about the muscle building capacity of your first bulk? So this is actually two questions. I'm going to start with the first one. Do you get diminishing returns in muscle gain with each new bulk? The answer is yes, but not because of bulking itself. You're going to get diminishing returns because you become a more experienced lifter, which means that the pace at which you are able to build muscle will slow down because you will get closer to what's called your genetic ceiling for muscle growth, which I think explains itself as far as the term goes. But just to spell it out clearly, the genetic ceiling is the maximum amount of muscle that you have the potential to build over your lifetime based on your genetics. This doesn't obviously take into account the use of PEDs, although if you do use PEDs, it's not like the genetic ceiling disappears, it just moves further. So you have a greater genetic ceiling, you have the potential to build more muscle because you are using performance enhancing drugs. At the same time, however, every time you do another bulk, and well, not only when you're bulking, but also when you are cutting, you get better at training, you increase the quality of each session, and you get better at managing your nutrition. So you get more out of each subsequent bulk as a result of being more experienced. Now, I can't tell you, however, to what extent these two variables even each other out. In other words, I can't tell you, well, because now you get more out of a bulk since you're more experienced, that makes up for the fact that you're no longer a beginner trainee. I can't make that statement. I can't make any statement with confidence on this whatsoever. All I can say is that both of these variables play a certain role. Now, in answer to the second question, is there anything special about the muscle building capacity of your first bulk? The answer is there's nothing special about your very first bulk other than the fact that you are earlier on in your training career. And so at that point, making gains is easier than when you're more experienced. Question number three. Do you need to keep dropping your calories in a deficit? Some people have a metabolism that's prone to adapting faster to being in a deficit, meaning that they will have to make more frequent adjustments. This is not on a whim, it's because due to their fast adapting metabolism, they tend to plateau more frequently than others. Whereas other people are the opposite. They can stay on the same calories and just keep losing weight pretty reliably over time. They might get some plateaus, but they're less frequent, so they just need fewer adjustments. First of all, your fat loss related targets, so typically your caloric intake, your step target, and your cardio target, if you have one, need to be effective. That is, they need to be yielding fat loss over time. Secondarily, once we have established that we've nailed the right fat loss related targets for you, you need to be consistent and accurate enough with hitting them. For example, there are a lot of people who think they are plateaued on the calories that they are eating, when in fact they have become less and less consistent and accurate with their calorie tracking method over time. To where when they started out, they were really motivated, they were tracking everything to the T, they were weighing everything that they could possibly weigh. They were only really estimating when they were going out to eat, but they were putting the effort in to estimate as accurately as possible. And then over time, that motivation diminished, and now they are eyeballing, they're not weighing everything, they are kinda sorta guesstimating when they go out to eat. So they think they're on the same calories because that's what they're putting into MyFitnessPal, but in practice they're eating several hundreds calories above their original target. So they don't need an adjustment and they haven't adapted to the deficits. They simply need to get back to the quality of tracking that they had before. So when I have a client that looks to have plateaued, I always consider these two factors first. Factor number one, are the fat loss targets still appropriate, or could the person have adapted to them? Factor number two, if they don't seem to be appropriate, then is there another explanation apart from metabolic adaptation? Are they still tracking as consistently and accurately as they were before? And that would be my first port of call if a client hasn't seen any changes in scale weight, pictures, clothes, and measurements for at least 2 weeks in a row, despite sticking to the plan like it's their Bible. Question number four. If you eat at maintenance, a range, but an average of the same calories every week, and train doing progressive overload, will you gain muscle slowly? And does that mean the scale will go up? Or will it stay the same over time? I'm really confused about this. If I am 67 kilograms now, will I still be 67 kilograms after a year or two? Now, I'm missing too many variables about this specific individual to answer the question as if I were talking to them. But that's good for the podcast because this episode is meant to be for everyone. So this question is perfect for me to make a more general point around essentially these two questions. Question number one, will you gain muscle at maintenance calories, and at what speed will you gain it? And question number two, will your scale weight change? The answer to the question on whether you're going to gain muscle at maintenance is yes, absolutely. You are going to gain muscle if you're training with progressive overload at maintenance calories. As for the speed, that's much harder to predict. I would argue it's impossible to predict, but assuming all else is equal, you're going to gain muscle faster than in a deficit and slower than in a surplus. The second question is about whether your scale weight is going to change. This typically depends, again, assuming all else is equal, on the magnitude of the total amount of muscle you gain and on the timeline. Usually, over a longer time scale, I find that scale weight tends to go up. But it can also go up faster over a shorter time scale if you are particularly responsive to training. So if you build muscle more easily than other people. There are also some people whereby their weight stays exactly the same or roughly the same, even over a longer time scale, but their physique looks very different because they have lost fat in the process of building muscle and they happen to lose an equal amount of fat as the amount of muscle that they gained. So the weight doesn't change, but the physique looks more athletic and more muscular. How fast you will be able to build muscle at maintenance calories depends on two main variables. Number one, how specific to muscle growth your program is. Number two, how high quality your execution of the program is. So to go into a little bit more detail about both, when I'm talking about specificity, I'm talking about ensuring that your program is based on the scientific principles that we are aware of to maximize muscle growth. And these are different from other fitness goals. So a muscle growth specific program is different than a strength program, than a CrossFit program, than a triathlon program, and so on. So you want to make sure that your program is specific to the goal at hand. And the more specific it is, the faster you're going to see results towards the stated goal. The second variable is the quality of your execution, and this comes down to making sure that you're training close enough to failure and making sure that you're targeting the muscle group that you're trying to train with a specific exercise with precise form. So my point here is that your caloric intake is going to support muscle growth, but it's really training that you need to focus on if you want to maximize it. Question number five. How does the thyroid affect fat loss? Oh well, I do know a little bit about the thyroid, quite a bit about it actually, because I have dealt with an underactive thyroid for years, for all of my adult life. And I have several clients that I help with their own thyroid related conditions, obviously with the help of their medical team, because I am not a doctor. But I know enough to be able to support what their doctor suggests with training and nutrition recommendations. Anyway, in answer to the question, the thyroid is a powerful regulator of your metabolism. If it's working normally, you don't have to worry about it. But there are some thyroid related conditions that can affect fat loss. Namely, the two main ones are hypothyroidism and hyperthyroidism. Hypothyroidism occurs when your thyroid is underactive, so it's working more slowly than it should. As a result, your metabolism will be slower than the average person your size doing the same amount of activity. In other words, if this hypothyroidism is not medicated, so you're not taking medication to speed up the thyroid and therefore your metabolism, you are going to need to diet on lower calories than somebody else your size doing the same amount of activity in order to lose fat. And you will also have to do most likely more activity to create the same size deficit. On the other hand, hyperthyroidism is the opposite. It means that your thyroid is working harder than it should. In that case, your metabolism is faster and you are going to have the propensity to lose weight even too easily. And I use the term weight in relation to hyperthyroidism because when it's not medicated and it's very significant, the weight loss can be fast enough as to cause muscle loss. If you have hypo or hyperthyroidism and you get the medication that you need, and all of your thyroid blood markers seem to be within the normal range and you no longer have symptoms of either condition, then your metabolism is going to go back to normal. Question number 6. I started lifting seriously last year in January, and I was in maintenance for 13 months. Then I started a calorie deficit since I am overweight. I kept and keep lifting hard 3 times a week. Can I still build a decent amount of muscle after another 2-3 months in a deficit and then going back to maintenance? So I thought it'd be interesting to answer this particular question because it gives me the opportunity to discuss the difference between fat loss and muscle growth potential in people at different stages of their training experience, but also between those who are overweight or have obesity and people who are leaner. So in this case, the question asker lifted seriously for 13 months. So at this moment in time, they are about a year and a half into their lifting journey. They are less experienced, so they have a greater potential for muscle growth. So whether they're in a deficit, at maintenance, or in a surplus, they're going to build muscle a little bit faster than somebody who was more experienced. Secondarily, they said that they are overweight. In this particular case, then, when you carry excess body fat, that extra fat is going to be readily converted into energy in a calorie deficit, leaving more resources available for muscle growth that otherwise wouldn't be there if you were leaner. So, if you carry more body fat, you carry more calories on your body stored as body fat. So, when you're eating fewer calories to try to lose fat, your body is going to take the calories from your body fats and turn them into energy. When you don't carry excess body fats, then you don't have those spare calories. So your body is going to have to work a bit harder in order to build muscle and even maintain it. And the leaner you get, the harder the body has to work to keep that muscle on your body while also being in a calorie deficit and continuing to lose fat. to the point where if you are very, very, very lean, and we're talking about people preparing for a photo shoot or for a bodybuilding competition, then you're not only really fighting to maintain muscle, so you're probably not really building much, if any at all, but you're also at a greater risk for muscle loss. So, my answer to this question would be you will absolutely build muscle after 2-3 months in a deficit and then maintenance again. And based on the fact that you are a less experienced lifter and that you carry excess body fat, you have a greater potential to do so than if you were leaner and more experienced. Finally, if you do carry excess body fat, my view is that staying in a deficit until you've lost all of the excess body fat will open up the opportunity for bulking, for going into a surplus, which I wouldn't recommend to somebody who currently carries excess body fat, because when you're bulking, you are gaining weight, and that will be some muscle, but also some body fat. And I would not want somebody who already has excess body fat to accumulate any more, because the more excess body fat you have, the greater the risk posed to your health. So right now, to you, a deficit may seem like it's making muscle growth harder because you're thinking about the short term. But long term, if you were to lose all the excess fat and then you were able to go into a surplus, it could actually be a more advantageous move for long term muscle growth. And now I want to end the podcast on this question. What are some underrated advantages of going back to maintenance calories? Which I think is a very intriguing question. And I have 5 advantages that I want to talk about. Number 1 is if you have lost a lot of weight and you go to maintenance calories between fat loss phases, so you're not done with fat loss yet, and you take a break at maintenance calories for a while, you get to practice the habits that you need to maintain fat loss once you're completely done with the fat loss journey. And if you don't do that, you will be less well prepared for long-term fat loss maintenance when you do end the diet. So I typically have phases where I focus on maintenance calories with the majority of my fat loss focused clients. The second advantage is that if you're in between fat loss phases, so the same situation as above, this helps reduce the diet fatigue that you may accumulate the longer you stay in a deficit and the more fat you lose. The third advantage is that when you're not in a deficit, it's the best time to improve your relationship with food, which is more challenging to do at the same time as actively being in a deficit. The fourth advantage is, as I've mentioned earlier, you're going to build muscle faster than when you were in a deficit. And that is very exciting. You are going to notice the difference between being in a deficit and being at maintenance calories. Not so much visually, but with respect to how you feel. You're going to have more energy to put into each training session. And the final advantage is that since you're not actively focusing on either bulking or cutting, you can develop other skills. For example, some of my clients like to practice eating without tracking calories and macros. Other clients want to focus on their body image. Other clients still want to focus purely on performance-related goals. When you're not focusing actively on cutting or bulking, there are so many more possibilities that you can decide to turn your mind to. On that note, these are all the questions I had for you today. Thank you very much for listening. If you have a question, again, you can reach out to me on Instagram and either ask in a question box that I put up on my stories on Mondays and Thursdays, or Fridays sometimes, or you can just DM me the question and I'll be happy to answer you. You can tell me if it's for the podcast and then I will also save it for a future podcast Q&A. It would really help if you left a 5-star rating and or a review, a written review, if you fancied spending a couple extra minutes in addition to giving the rating. But honestly, the star rating would be absolutely brilliant to help get the podcast to reach more people. And as always, thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to sign up for coaching, the links are in the show notes, and I will talk to you next time. Lastly, if you want to support the podcast and help me reach more people, please leave a 5-star rating or review on any podcast platform that you're using. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.